Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks, Tim, for having me. This is going to be fun. I appreciate it. It was so good to run into you again at Podfest. I know you go to a ton of conferences,
Yeah.
so I'll probably see you again. But it was great to see you.
Okay, so shall we just jump straight in and start talking
Let's
about the
go.
books?
Let's go.
Here we go. The Agent Pendergast series by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. I've actually put that down as relic on the Amazon Live because it didn't seem to let me do the whole series. So why did you pick this one?
So this one is, they're actually, it's really interesting because they're co-authors, and I both believe they work for one of the big museums. Like, I don't think it's the Smithsonian, it may be the Washington Museum, but anyway. But there are these co-authors, which one is that's really interesting to me is how like these people write books together. Yeah. But it started with Relic. I mean, I don't know how many years ago it went. They actually made it to a really bad movie. But it is that book was really, really good. Like the first one is really, really good. And what happens is there's kind of he's kind of a character. There's so many characters in the first one, but he's this agent who helps solve this murder in the museum. And he kind of took off. He's a strange bird. He's from New Orleans. And anyway, this whole mythology erupted on this guy. And so I think they're in books 12 or 13 where they've kind of opened up this world and had this detective. He kind of does that. It's kind of a mix between the X-Files and like a really great mystery. So I really, really like it. In fact, as soon as I see that they're written another book, I usually go buy it. Douglas and Preston are the two guys I think it's Lincoln Child and Douglas Preston are the two authors. There's another Lincoln Child, so don't buy his books because it'll throw you off. But they each have their own novels too, which they're both great writers. So I really enjoy this series though. So it's one of my favorite fiction series that if they come out with a new book, I'm going to buy.
How long has it been running for then? You said it's quite a while.
It's been a while. I mean, they're on like book 13 and they don't put, I think, if they do one a year, they're good. So I really enjoy it. I've shared it with some of my book reading friends and they've really started to dive into it as well. So it's a fun series. If you like that, it's kind of Michael Crichton-ish.
Yeah.
And so it's got a lot of science stuff in it kind of too. And so it's fun. I really enjoy it. It's one of my favorites.
Okay. And should we go on to the next book, which is into the world of nonfiction, which is Creativity, Inc. by Edwin Catmull.
Yes. So one of my favorite business books of all time. So Ed Catmull is the one who actually helps found Pixar and Steve Jobs came into this as well. But he talks about running creative people, which is really, really interesting. And it's kind of the behind the scenes of how Pixar started, their processes, how they do movies. They make it so anybody can come in and give notes on a movie. They have a big meeting and doesn't matter if you're the janitor or the director, you can say what do you think about this and add suggestions. So I really like the behind the scenes version of it. And I also like, because I work with creatives, I consider myself a creative.
Yeah.
It's just a great book for that kind of stuff. So if you like Pixar, this is a definite book to read. I think they're one of the best storytellers that are out right now. And so I like to study what they put out.
Are there any hints or secrets in this book that you particularly resonated with or resonated with you even?
I think the ability that they scrapped one, I think it was either Toy Story 2 or something. In the last hour, they said, this is not going to work. We're going to have to start over. And it was a big deal. Like being able to kill your darlings, I guess, and do it in a way and to make sure excellence comes out. I think that's one of the lessons that stuck with me the most. Is they saw, I mean, they were almost done. They were in their final renders. And, even back then it took a long time to render this. And they're like, the story's just not working, guys. We're going to have to do something. And so it was a mad dash and everybody kind of came in together. But I guess that being able to, take, and also how to work with creative people and the ways, he had some really good points in there, how to talk with them. Cause we can be a little flaky, creative people. So how to deal with creatives, I think, is another great one.
Okay. Awesome. Right. Should go to the next book, which is The 1 Year Bible by Anonymous. It's got here.
Yeah. So this is actually way back in the day. Michael Hyatt had this in his toolkit, and it's basically Bible reading through the day. I'm a believer, so I just wanted to do this, and so I've been doing it every year since. I get a new translation because this series has a bunch of different translations that you can read. So I've been doing it. So it gives you like Old Testament, New Testament, Psalms, Proverbs, and by the end of the year, you're done. So Hyatt recommended it to me, and I thought, I'll give it a try. So I've been doing it now for about 4 years, I think. So I really like it.
So what's it called, the 1 year Bible? Is it they change it every year?
Well, no, it's you get through the Bible in a year. Like if you read it every day, like it's you get at the end of the year, you're like done. So like you're like that's if you've ever tried to slog through some of that stuff, it can be hard.
Yeah.
So this makes it easy, and so I really like it. I'm glad Michael Hyatt recommended it.
Okay, so is it literally the Bible rewritten in daily things?
Yes.
Or?
So there's a couple different. You can get 1 year Bible plans. You can do all sorts of things, but this one it's not really chronological. It kind of goes through it. The New Testament, Old Testament. But what the thing is you get an Old Testament passage, you get a New Testament passage, and a Psalms and a Proverbs. I really like the way they do it. So that's been helpful for me.
Yeah.
Because I was until my 40s before I ever read it all the way through. So that's kind of...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No post-credit scenes at the end of the Bible?
No, there isn't. There is nothing there post-credits, no.
Okay, right. On to the next book, which is 10 Times is Easier Than 2 Times by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy.
Yeah, so 10x is greater than 2x it was a really, and I've talked about it in my mastermind, and we've kind of grabbed onto this kind of philosophy is there's this principle of flywheels. Like when you get a project and you're trying to get working, it takes a lot of work to get it spinning, but once it starts spinning, you can just kind of tap it and keep it going. And so instead of just saying like, okay, I'm going to do this, like let's say I'm a podcast and I say, instead of just doing a podcast a week, I'm going to do a podcast, twice a week.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's a level up. But then if you, to 10x, it'd be like, I'm going to do a podcast every day. And it seems like, oh my gosh, that's so much more work, but really the same processes are there that you could do it if you had all the systems in place. So it's kind of like how to get those systems in place, and by going and shooting for some of those high end things that you think you could never do, allows you to accomplish them quicker and in ways that you never really thought of before. So that was I never thought I could do really email marketing. Well, now I'm doing emails twice a week and they're really, really working. So every year I'm trying to think of things that I can 10x instead of just, doing kind of the next step. You kind of shoot for the moon and you can make some really great gains that way.
Okay. So it sounds like it was quite a influential book.
I really do. So I tried to pick for this whole list as books that I have that I continue to use, or I continue to use things lessons I've learned from.
Okay. Well, back to fiction. I think the Chronicles of Narnia box set, which obviously you're probably not using practically, but it's
right. So I love those books ever since I was a kid. I remember staring at those book covers and read them over and over. I still try to read them at least once a year. Read them to my kids. C.S. Lewis is one of my favorite authors.
Yeah,
and so I really enjoy Verse of Narnia and the allegory to Christianity and all that stuff. I love all that stuff. So still one of my favorite books. My kids fell in love with it too. So I just really cherish those books because they're such a big part of my childhood, and even now I still enjoy them.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think every book in the series has been recommended on this show individually before. But recommend the whole box.
So I guess my favorite one out of that one, I really love the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. That's probably my favorite. And I like even the Last Battle. I think it's cool because it kind of wraps things up in a cool way. So, yeah, I love all those books.
Yeah, I'm not sure the Voyage of the Dawn Treader has been recommended actually.
No. Yeah, so they did. That was one I was so excited that they were going to make into a movie, and I was like, nah, it was okay, but it was the movie's never as good as the book.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, right. Talking about this is not a movie. This was a TV series. The Band of Brothers. I presume it's what the TV series is based on.
Yes, the book is amazing. I'm a big World War II buff, and I think Band of Brothers. I started reading a lot of Stephen Ambrose's books after this one. Yeah. He does one on like Oh, the trains, and then also Lewis and Clark, and all sorts of cool ones. And so I really liked this one, Band of Brothers. And I think it made an excellent. Tom Hanks is the producer, and Spielberg did the same guys who did Saving Private Ryan did the Band of Brothers series for HBO, and it was excellent as well. But the book is just it's so good. So if you're into World War II stuff, you have to read that one. I just think it's a no-brainer.
Right. Beginner's Pluck. I love the title for this, by Liz Forkin Bohannon.
Yeah, so she's an entrepreneur that I'd never heard about before.
Yeah.
I saw her speak at a conference, and I read her book. She talked about having a personal manifesto, and I'm like, interesting. And so I kind of do what she does, and every year I kind of revise. I have a personal manifesto of like what I believe in, what I want to work on, what I say, what things are important to me, and like what to put like time and energy into. And I kind of revise that every year. And she was the one who really came up with this. Her story is really great. Like she built a fashion company mainly to help girls in, I believe it's Africa, have opportunities to go to school. And so she started this business mainly to give them opportunities. I think they make thongs or shoes sort of things. I don't know. You can tell I'm not into fashion. But the story how she did it and her passion behind it and the things they were able to accomplish is really, really cool. So it's a really great book. But there's a lot of good takeaways. But for me, the biggest one that I continually use is that personal manifesto, how to write one, what she stands for, what she doesn't want any part of, and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of do that and try to revise that every year. Like, for example, one of mine is, to spend time with my kids. Now my kids are out of the house. So I revise that to make sure I talk to them, at a certain intervals, like at least once a week, if not every day. And also like practice. I'm kind of a budding piano player.
Yeah.
Not very good, but I want to get better. So that's one of my things that I try to do on there. And so it's almost like a mission statement, that you do for yourself, but you can also throw things up against it. Like, this year I revised it. I'm not going to be doing this because I said this year I'm really going to concentrate on this. And that really helps kind of keep you focused and moving forward.
Right. Let's go on to the next book, which is Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. So, why this book?
I think every entrepreneur I know has read this and recommends it. It's one of the classics. It just came out 2.0, which is an expanded edition. I would recommend to get because he's added some stuff, some more modern things. But it's just really good how to like make a website, tell your story in a way that's built on, the hero's journey kind of a thing, and they walk you through it, like how Star Wars has the protagonist, and you walk it through, and how to do that for your brand and your website and your messaging. So there's so much stuff in there. Like I read it a long time ago, and I'm reading the new one now. I've got a kind of a challenge that I'm doing with some other people in my email list of trying to read 101 books this year.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm going to read this one again. It'll count because it's new.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of books. So there's another author I like, John Acuff, and he reads 100 books a year. And so I had to try to beat him. And so I want to go 101. So we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, this has been recommended a few times before, and I still haven't got around to reading it.
I mean, he's got a great podcast. Donald Miller is the author, and he's been around for a while, but super smart stuff. He actually now trains the story brand concept kind of a thing. So it's kind of a philosophy now that a lot of people like to use and throw things against their messaging and their website and visuals, all sorts of things. So it really works kind of all encompassing for a business to try to use.
Okay, right. Next one is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And this has been mentioned before a few times.
It is a really, I actually I read his book and then I took his master class that was on, that they had offered a video series, and it was really good as well. So if you don't know who Chris Voss is, he used to be like the highest level of the FBI's hostage negotiator. So he has some really, really practical and good tips. In fact, I've used them on clients before, like, or when you're struggling to get somebody who won't listen to you to listen to you, it works really well. He has a great example in the book about how he was able to get a brand new truck really, really below the value that they were offering it at because he used some of these strategies. So it's kind of fun to see. It's not, and the cool thing is it's not like you're not hypnotizing somebody by using these like magic tricks. It's really practical things on how to negotiate, how to compromise, but also stand your ground and get what you need out of a deal. So it's not, you know, it's not like you don't ever apologize or anything like that. But it's very practical because he's been in these high pressure situations. The stuff he gives you, of course, is going to help with like just talking and negotiating things. Even if you have a boss, I remember when I used to work for somebody, I read this book and then like the next week I applied some of those techniques and it worked. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So very cool. If you haven't read it, it's highly recommended. It's got a great audiobook edition as well, but he's a great speaker if you ever have a chance to see him speak as well.
Yeah, I listened to the audio book, but some time ago, and I remember him saying about everybody thinks yes is such a great word, but actually getting to know a lot of the time is when you actually start, because a lot of people just say yes to get rid of you.
Yeah. And continue to follow through and go down. So a lot of practical tips. It's one of those ones I probably need to read again.
Yeah.
And this might be a good point. I was going to talk to you about this before Tim, and I wanted to talk about like how I consume books, because I think your readers would find this interesting, or your watchers to see this would be interesting to them. Is that my wife has made me I can't buy any physical books anymore because I have way too many, and so I use Kindle. I'm a Kindle book thing. I think I looked before when I was going through this list trying to pick the ones I wanted to talk about. I think I have about 900 books on Kindle. It's ridiculous. And the reason I like it is because, especially for I don't use it for fiction as much, but for business, I usually read them on my iPad in the morning, and I highlight things. Like, it's easy in the Kindle to highlight things. Well, I have a service called Readwise, which actually takes those highlights and puts them in my database on Notion. Oh. So I have, like, when I have a speaker that I've on my show, or I've done something, that I want to pull real quick, I can go to the actual title. All my quotes are listed there and the page number. So, and it does it automatically. So I really like it. Like when I have guests on my show, I always they'll usually either send me a physical copy or something like that. And I'm like, I got to get it on Kindle. So I go ahead and buy it because now I'm so used and it's so much of my process of highlighting those things, because it makes it really easy to recall things. And then Readwise sends you an email too.
Yeah.
That you can go and like bubble up new stuff in your mind. So anyway, that's a great thing I like to do. And I need to read this one again.
Yeah. I had Terry Brock on. I don't know if you saw him at Pod Fest. He's like an AI. He was talking about AI, but he does something.
Terry Brock, yeah.
Yeah, he takes something similar, but then he feeds it through like AI to summarize it and stuff.
Right.
I'm actually thinking I should do that sort of thing, because I read all these books and then promptly forget everything I've read or listened to in them.
Yes.
And
that was my problem as well. And this has helped immensely do that. So.
Right. Let's go on to the next book before we get lost in the weeds of process. Fully Alive by Ken Davis.
So this was one of the ones this guy probably helped my speaking the most. Yeah. I saw him way back in the day in a conference in Tennessee. He's hilarious. I guess he used to do a television show or something, but he is an amazing speaker. And this is his book where he talks about like doing things that, make yourself fully alive. Don't wait too long, do things that, you're passionate about. And anyway, it's a great book. Highly recommend it. But he's also got another book that he wrote with Michael Hyatt about speaking and doing presentations, which if you're a speaker or you do a lot of, getting up in front of them, talking to people, highly recommend that one as well. He's one of these guys who I did never hear of before, but I heard him speak, and you've seen these people where they come up on stage and you're like, I got to buy everything they have. They're so good. And he was one of them. And so he's getting a little elderly now, so I don't know how much speaking he does, but if you have a chance to watch any of his presentations or read his book, but it's really, really great. Fully Alive is another great one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I go to a lot of events.
Right, I know.
I would say I'm trying to cut down, but that's always a total lie. But I go to a lot of events, but every now and then you see somebody who's just such a good speaker, either in their technique or in the substance. Mm-hmm. But it's usually a mix of both. Actually, it's usually right. It does work really well.
And he was one of those that you're like, okay, I need to learn how to speak like he does, because he just he does everything. You see it like that's the way I want to speak when I grow up. So he's really, really good.
Yeah. So when you grow up,
when I grow up, finally.
Yeah, you might be there. Right, the next one. The 12-week year. Get more done in 12 weeks than others do in 12 months by Brian Moran and Michael Lennington. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So the funny thing is, so way back in 2014, I was starting my own podcast. I went to Podcast Movement in San Diego right after Social Media Marketing World. I met two other guys and we decided to start a mastermind. And one of the guys is Eric Fisher and
yeah.
Anthony Wade is the other one. And we have gone and done this mastermind every Monday for, I think we're getting close to 10 years now. So pretty amazing. But what we kind of read this book together when we way back in the day when we first started this. And so we even called the mastermind the 12-week mastermind. And what it basically is you just are very, very structured and you put things together. So you condense quarters into, the 12 weeks. And so that makes it easier. So you kind of plan and you do get a lot more done in that time by being very, very systematic on how you're going to take care of that time, being productive in those times. And it also ties into kind of the same philosophy of 10x is greater than 2x. So I really like that idea of getting those things spun up quickly that don't take a lot of, it takes a lot of effort to get them going, but once you have them going, it kind of slowly, you know what I'm talking about, Tim, because you've done live shows and consistently putting out content, and that sounds like a lot when you first get started, but once you start doing it, you get in that rhythm and routine, and you're able to okay, I'm just kind of, it's that flywheel thing. I need to make a new graphic. I need to get a new guest. Other than that, everything's kind of on autopilot kind of a thing. So I really enjoyed that book. I think it has a lot of great philosophies and strategies inside of there to move forward.
I typed to see if somebody requested this before, and nobody's said it before as a book on this show, but I did come up with the 4-hour work week. But this sounds a bit more realistic than that in a way.
So the 4 hour, that's a great book too. Tim Ferriss's stuff is really, really good. I've read most all of his books. This one's just a little more, we all would love a 4-hour work week, but I mean, we're all not Tim Ferriss, right? So this one is a little more practical, but it has some great ideas though in it too. And I want to go read it again because of the applications of AI wasn't really there when some of these books started. And I think there's a lot of now applications that we can use and some tools that we didn't have before that can really, really help optimize some of these kind of philosophies.
Yeah, the whole AI thing is... The trouble is, I keep seeing people saying about, even books about AI, but it's like a lot of them are out of date by the time they're written.
I mean, that's like textbooks and so many other things. But yeah, you're right. I'm reading one. I'm having Phil Palin on my show, and he has an AI book that he came out that's really good for small business. And he's doing a good job of listing ways and kind of ways to use tools. And he gives a lot of tools in there, but you can always plug and play. I always tell people, don't buy. Everybody wants you to get a year subscription to these AI plans, and I'm like, they change like weekly. Like, you know what? Like, there's a new one coming out tomorrow. Like, you don't want to be locked in. Magi's a great one because they're always adding new APIs, and so it's kind of like a shell, and you can plug in all these different ones. Those are better, I think. But I think the smart entrepreneurs are going to be taking some of these tried and true philosophies and strategies and using AI inside of them to even boost it a little bit more.
Okay, all right. Let's go from AI to something totally different. New Morning Mercies, a daily gospel devotional.
Yeah, so this is one I've been doing for years. I think it was so funny. I think when my son graduated, somebody gave it to him, and once again, I bought it on Kindle. But I use those two, and I talked about the 1 Year Bible and this one. Those are kind of my two devotionals that I do every morning. I've been doing it for years. I just think he actually started out tweeting these things out, and then he took that tweet and expanded it into like a kind of a 2-page devotional or whatever in there. And I like it. I like the way his philosophy. I like the way he makes me think. I recommended it. Another friend of ours, both, who's reading it too, is Ian Anderson Gray.
Okay.
So I recommended to him, and he's reading it. So I just think I like the format. I like that it's short in the morning because usually I'm like ready to go and get up, and it's been hard for me to ease into the morning, and that's what I try to do. And this is a good one. So those are this list. I mean, I could go so many more, Tim. You only let me have 12. I could have done 40.
Well, I mean, I have had people on more than once before, so give it 6 months or so, and then
I'll have a whole new list, especially if I'm reading 100. But yeah, so those are good. I try to kind of mix it up between business, fiction, and then like spiritual devotional books, because I am a very eclectic reader. I don't know about you, but I read all sorts of things. I don't get like in a.
Well, I think it's important not to get in a rut. Anyway, I asked 2 questions to every guest at the end of the show. No, well, neither are particularly hard. But the first question, I used to ask a simpler version of this, but now I ask a more complicated one, which is, of this list of books, if you met a person in the wild, what kind of questions would you ask them to work out which amongst these books to give them? So you had the pile of these books. What would be the little flow chart in your mind, like, in terms of working out which of the books to give them?
I would say, like, I would ask, like, where they are, like, because, like I said, there's, like, 3 different kind of buckets here.
Yeah.
It'd be, like, what, where they are spiritually, kind of, and then, like, what, are they an entrepreneur? Do they work for a company? Do they have a side hustle? What do they want to do? And if they said, and then if they, like, hey, I'm just really, I need something. I'm tired of nonfiction books. I need some good fiction. And I could come up with lists for them like that. So I guess I would have to ask them kind of those kind of 3 different questions of like those kind of things, like, where are you spiritually, where are you, what kind of business are you running? Do you want to start one? That kind of thing. And then, like, what do you do for entertainment? What's your fun? What do you have? What do you like to, like, consume? Like, what's your favorite TV show? Those kind of things. Because and then you had a list of, you wanted to make sure that you could find them on Amazon, right? Like, there's some out of state, and there's another great series, but I could only find 2 of them at the end, and I read them as a kid, and I would buy all of them now today if they were on Kindle, but they're James White and his whole series, and it's very eclectic. It's called Hospital Station. What it is this alien hospital ship. And my dad had a book, and I started reading it, and I really liked it. But it's so fun, and it's like Star Trek meets ER.
Yeah,
it's the best thing you could say. And so I love it when I talk to people, and they're like, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm like, oh, if you like that, you'll like this.
Yeah.
And so that's why note taking is really important.
Yeah.
So I know a good book. Let me pull up my Notion really quick. So
yeah,
I guess that would be what I would say, is I'd have to break it down a little bit on trying to figure out what to recommend. What about you? What's your favorite book of all time, Tim? I bet you've never been asked that.
I haven't been asked that.
Fiction. I'll make it easier. Fiction book.
Well, I've written fiction books, so I would say that.
But one you read. What one you've read? Like, your favorite author?
I haven't really got a favourite author as such. It's funny, actually. The first book that comes to mind is actually The Midnight Library, only because of recency bites, because somebody recommended that recently.
Is it good? I have not read it.
It is a good book. I mean, actually, they only recommended, this was Gillian Whitney, who was like, well, it'll be, people watching on the podcast, it'll be 2 weeks ago. Anybody watching live, it'll be 2 days ago. But yeah, she picked The Midnight Library and The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, which are 2 books I've listened to because they were recommended on the show. And The Midnight Library is one where it's a bit surreal, but she's at the end of her life and she ends up in this library seeing all the things she could have done if she made different choices in her life. And it's a very profound book. Kind of deals with sort of afterlife-y concepts. It's not Christian as such, but it's sort of spiritual. And The Alchemist is just a fantastically well-written kind of poetic style book, short story book like Paulo Coelho. So from a recency bias point of view, and that from remember it, but yeah, I mean,
do you have a favorite author? Like, you're like, oh, he just came out with something, I'm gonna go buy it.
Not really.
Really?
Well, I tend to read much more non-fiction anyway, and I have been a total parasite to book recommendations on this show.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
I did that with my email list, and I came up with all these ones. Like, I made a list. I'm like, I gotta start cranking through these. So
Oh yeah,
fun.
Well, I mean, there's been like about 800 books recommended on the show, and I've probably listened to about 15, 20 of them.
Yeah,
and all the
that's
others.
a lot.
Most of them are pretty good. There's very few. There are some ones where the person on the show wrote the book, but
Right.
even then, it's usually quite good. Which comes to my second question, which I'm not sure if have you ever written any books or contributed to? Well, you've contributed to one of mine, but you haven't.
One of yours. I've done some for Ross Brand, Peg Fitzpatrick. I've done some stuff and helped her, like art of social media and stuff. So no, but it's on the list. Like there's somebody I've been talking. I actually go to speak at CEX this year, and that's Lulu is a self-publishing. They run the conference now, and I talked to them about writing a book. So I think I really want to. I think I've got enough content and enough stuff, and actually writing these emails twice a week have kind of boosted my confidence a little bit. Like people will like it and like, okay, maybe I can do this thing. So I like reading them. It makes me nervous writing one.
Well, that is the question. Is like, what is it? It's usually because I'm often talking to authors a lot of the time, and it's like, what's the next book you're writing? And I also ask, what is the book that you think ultimately you want to write? Like your kind of. Is there a book in the future you think you will write, but you're not quite there yet in terms of like? Because I think it's always a terrible idea as your first book to write the kind of the book thing, the spiritual book, so to speak, the spiritual animal one. But
the one that you, yeah, I'm kind of that same way because there's one I really want to write, but I want to get one out first, kind of a thing. And I'll probably do one on like podcasting and live video or something like that, something that I know, but also I have 4 years of guests for my show, and there's a lot of content that I can pull from that I think is still evergreen and would be good advice. So that one, but there is one that I want to write, just kind of almost like my misadventures. I'm a big fan of Dave Barry. I kind of want to write a humorous book, but also give some really solid advice.
Yeah.
But I kind of get frustrated with some of the pretentiousness of business books and the ones that gurus have. Like, I mean, I get it, but like it moves so fast, the creator economy and industry, that something that a million view YouTuber has done, it's changed so much that even if you copied exactly what they did, it might not work anymore because it moves so fast. Now you can look at best practices and stuff like that, but there's no formula. So anyway, I think there's could be some things that I could teach other people's in a book and have some fun doing it. So maybe. What about you? You're going to write another?
I've got quite a few ideas and things. I actually wrote a lot of fiction books during NaNoWriMo, like years ago, and then COVID happened, and now kind of London NaNoWriMo community went all over the place, and it's me. But yes, I might write another non-fiction book, actually, more similar to what you were kind of saying there, as in like a more philosophical kind of book. But whether I actually do it, because I keep stacking things up one after the other, and then it's like,
you travel all the time. I guess you can ride in the plane and things. So I mean, I guess
I mean, a lot of these things is working out how to make use of the time you have when you wouldn't necessarily be doing stuff otherwise. Right. So it's multitasking. Yes. So you've answered my two questions. So now you get the opportunity to tell the people watching how to get in touch with you and what you do. If there anybody's interested, or if they just want to talk to you about books, how to get in touch.
Yeah, I love to talk about books. I'm a book nerd, so hopefully I'd love to talk to anybody about their favorite. In fact, they could email me their favorite books. I'd love to know. Whoever watches the show, say, hey, saw you on Tim, and shoot me an email at jeff@jeffsieh.com. That's JEFF. S is in Sam, IEH, I before E, especially in C.
Yeah.
That's how my mom made me say it. But I do a show every Friday. Been doing it for almost 4 years now, called Social Media News Live. It's Friday at noon Central Time. Have great guests, and we have great conversations. Pull in the audience as much as possible with their questions, and it's also a podcast. You can find the podcast also at If you just do a search for Social Media News Live, or you can do the same thing on YouTube. We're actually on YouTube called Creator News Live because we're going to actually kind of rebrand it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I would love for you guys to show up for the show. Tim shows up sometimes. It's a great show. It's been awesome. And then I would love if you want to join my newsletter where I talk about books and social media and creator economy and all that kind of stuff. Just go to jeffc.com/news, and that's how you can get in touch with me. And I'd love to hear from anybody who saw this show, because books are important.
Yeah.
And I just read something, Tim, that book sales, not book sales, but like more and more kids are not reading as much. And I'm like, that freaks me out a little bit. Like, I think everything that I've accomplished is because I can read.
Yeah.
Like, I used to joke that my whole business is built on people not wanting to read the help manual stuff. It's all there. They just don't want to read it. So yeah, anyway, I'm excited to talk about books.
Yeah. Well, as we're going off on tangents, and I waste a little bit of time. I once did a podcast episode where I said why you should read chapter 1 of the manual. And it's because I had a programming job years ago, and they gave me the manual for this weird computer language that only them and GEC used. It was a version of BASIC.
Right.
And chapter 1 was all of the new features in the language since the last version. And I was the only person who clearly read this. So I knew all these shortcuts and things because I actually did read chapter 1 of the manual. And it's surprisingly, I mean, it's very easy not to read the manual and assume that you know everything. But I think and it's true with like YouTube videos and things. Sometimes I'll see a YouTube video, and part of me is like, oh, that's not relevant for me. And then I catch myself, I might say, no, you still watch it, because you often learn a lot.
So Tim, do you read faster than you watch? Because I have found that there's a lot of great information. I love YouTube.
Yeah.
We're doing live video here and all sorts of stuff. So I think it's great. I love doing video stuff. But I read faster than I can watch videos. So a lot of times I'll go try to find the transcript. Do you find yourself doing that?
No, I'm not that
read
keen.
it more?
I mean, I tend to... I don't read that much anymore. I tend to either listen double speed on Audible. I'm not quite got to the stage where I'm watching on YouTube on double speed yet, because I tend to just watch it on the TV as it's around. But yeah, I mean, that's probably quite a good idea for a lot of videos, to be honest.
Well, sometimes I'm like, I don't have time, but I'll read it. So.
Well, maybe she'd be getting AI to read it for you, maybe. But then we could end up down this slippery slope of we never actually consume anything directly. We're like, go and read this Perplexity or whatever, and then it gives us, it ignores the important thing that we wanted to know.
Exactly. So, well, I'm glad you do this podcast. This is really great that you are highlighting books, because I think we need to continue to read and read more. And I hope authors don't get discouraged with all the AI slop that's out there and continue to write good stuff.
Yeah. So thanks for being on the show, and thanks for anybody who's been watching live, and thanks for anybody who's watching in the future.